so much.
Okay. It's saying we're going live, but we're not yet.
It says live to me.
Oh, does it?
That's live to me.
We're live. Hi, guys. I'll give a couple seconds to see if anyone's here. If you are here and in the chat, come say hello. Let me know you're here, especially if you're in the ASC, Accountability Success Circle, because it's for prizes. And I'm hearing myself, which means that it's
live to me.
Yeah.
Oh, does it?
Can you hear that? Oh no, it's repeating. Hi, guys. I'll give a couple seconds to see if anyone's
I
have here. So many. I'm going to mute myself. Hold on a second.
Turn this into a DJ shadow set.
Right. It's all good, everyone. This is how we roll. And April is fixing a few things, and then she's gonna come back in. There she is.
In a long time that I've done that. Whew. It was open in one random place that I did not see. Okay, let's start over. Welcome everyone to the 42nd of these Accountability Success Circle webinars. I'm April Schluter. We're here with Gary Ware. Hey, say hi, Gary.
Hello, hello.
And our amazing guest, who I will introduce in just a second. But just so you know, I will say it all again. If you are here live, thank you. Let us know by typing in the chat. Feel free to engage, answer, or ask any questions as we go, because we are here to have this amazing conversation. If for those of you who don't know what the Accountability Success Circle is, we are an awesome community that is focused on living intentional lives and figuring out how to have more fun while we're getting stuff done. And today's guest could not be any better to talk about this topic. So I'm so excited. But before I go into that, every month we have a theme or an area of focus in life. And of those 8 areas, which are intimate relationships, social relationships, career, money, family, personal development. What am I missing? Health and wellness. And the last area is fun. And so every month for this year, we are focusing on a different area. This month, we are talking about fun. And now I can say that we've got an expert here who knows about fun, and not only about fun, but how to make fun a habit, which is so important. He has written the book that is recently published called The Fun Habit. And we're going to talk a lot about what's in that book today. And I'm going to read a little bit from his fun bio, just so that you know. His name is Mike Rucker, Dr. Mike Rucker, PhD, right? Doctor, yeah. Yes. He's an author, father, husband, organizational psychologist, and behavioral scientist, recovering entrepreneur, fitness enthusiast with mechanical parts, VW bus aficionado, seeker traveler, future astronaut. I love it. So he wrote this book. He is amazing. We are so excited. And I was saying right before we went live that he is the coolest nerd that I know, aside from me. So we are going to jump right into it. Mike, thank you so much for being on the webinar with us this month. We are so excited to have you.
I'm grateful for being invited, and definitely it's fun to be part of the community. So thanks for all you do. Absolutely.
And so I'm going to turn it to Gary because he's going to grill you with questions, but and spearhead the conversation, and I'll be here in and out, and I'll do all the cameras, lights, and all that fun stuff and manage the chat. But super excited to hear what we're going to talk about today. Yay. Okay. Gary, take it away.
Awesome. All right. Before we get started, big shout out to Terry, who is joining us live. He's in the chat. What's up, Terry? You get a big air horn for you. And so, if you have questions, thoughts, leave them in the chat. April's going to be manning that. Anyways, over to you, Mike. Before we dive deep into fun and how to create a habit of it, because that's why we're here. We heard your bio, but give us some of the highlights that don't often get talked about.
Yeah, I think, I'm just trying to figure it out like the rest of us. The reason that I found an interest in this material was I've been a big fan of positive psychology for quite some time. And I still am a big believer in those tools and a big zealot of that space. But I think what we're finding now is, similar to productivity porn, sort of the good vibes only mentality is causing a lot of problems. And so have sort of been on this journey, really standing on the shoulders of others to unpack what that means, but that also, even if striving for happiness all the time is problematic, like how can we still live fun and joyful lives, and fulfilling lives for that matter, in spite of the fact that, chasing happiness can paradoxically make a lot of us unhappy.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I will give you the cheers from that. So totally agree. And we have some more people chiming in. Our friend Carissa she's in Austin now. She just recently moved. She's joining us. Hello. All right. So before we get into like the more upbeat, the lively part, want to like just set the stage. Why is it important to focus on this? And I want to hear from you, Mike. Like, shouldn't we just by our own nature just have fun, as humans? Why do we need to create a habit of that?
Yeah.
And shouldn't we just work?
Yeah, right. Well, there's multiple headwinds, right? So I tend to have to give somewhat of a bullet list because they're not going to apply to everyone listening. But, for some of us, it's that, old Protestant Puritan work ethic. That's certainly how I was raised. So some of my correctives were sort of, identifying my self-worth through productivity and realizing that if we overprescribe to that, we're essentially working all the time. And paradoxically, that leads to not being productive. So that's one headwind. The other is, that we're in a knowledge work economy now. And so for the first time, within our era, at least Gen X and the generations under us, we don't really know the goalposts. So essentially our to-do list can go on forever. And so, in our fathers and mothers' work, where it was a lot more algorithmic, you knew when the week was over, but now we don't. And so there's always this sort of pull to get as much done as we can, but that becomes insidious, right? I mean, there's no way to ever get off that hamster wheel. And so without a course corrective with regards to that social norm, that can become problematic. And then, the advent of all this technology that was essentially built to keep our attention, right? There's a reason they call it the attention economy. And so as fun as social media and things like that, those things capture our attention, so does Slack and so does email. And so oftentimes, if we're not really deliberate about creating what I call transition rituals from work to leisure, then fun essentially gets pushed out of your life, right? Because you're always like, oh, this is an interesting email and I like that person from work, let me read it, right? But what we know is that when fun does get engineered out, you start to see these really negative outcomes, not just psychologically, but physiologically as well. We're seeing dramatic increases in burnout and loneliness across the US. Anyone that's kind of been on LinkedIn over the last couple of months has seen the statistics. In the US, people, quote unquote, signifying themselves as very happy has fallen from 34% down to 19%. The American Psychological Association says 1 out of 4 people are so burnt out that they don't even really know what to do with their time outside of work, like, let alone having fun. And then, I kind of do create these parallels between, as an organizational psychologist, between leisure, which are opportunities to have fun, but we're the worst at it, right? Or second to worst in the developed world, which is kind of amazing when, Americans love to beat our chest about being the best at everything, right? We're second to last, with a measly 10 days off per year after completing, years worth of work. There's only one country worse than us, Micronesia, that comes in at 9 days off per year's worth of work. So we're in this weird spot. We've created these social norms that sort of don't prioritize enjoying ourselves. And that's why, as whimsical as fun sounds, it's now not just something that's enjoyable. It's something that's, I would make the argument needed. And there's science to back me up on that.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh my gosh. So much to unpack there, and we're going to get there. I'm just taking notes just to keep me on track. But for those of you who don't know you personally, Mike, what was one of the reasons that you wanted to write this book? Have you always been a fun-loving person, or were there some events that maybe shifted your perspective and you wanted to share this with others?
No, I think, it's funny. And I love being in the midst of you and April and, colleagues like, Kristen and Jeff, because I don't have those sensibilities, right? I'm not a fun guy. In fact, it's so funny. Like I found my daughter will tell anyone listening, like I literally find the way to suck fun out of fun by, talking about all this research. So, but I have been a big fan of the quantified self movement. And, like I remember me and Dave Asprey being the young bucks when Gary Wolf got all that together. So I think my path in all of this was using my background in positive psychology, really trying to optimize for happiness. And that all went really well. I mean, I was, on this track where it seemed like, everything was going in the right direction until it wasn't. So long story short, in 2016, my younger brother unexpectedly passed away. So I kind of built this tower, and was a bit Pollyanna about everything. And I got knocked on my butt, right? And then these two aren't related, but shortly after that, after identifying as a runner for as long as I can remember, I found out that I had an injury that required hip surgery, and that I wasn't going to be able to run, at least competitively. Like I can still do 5K walk runs with my daughter, but I was doing marathons and Ironmans at the time. And so I had these two big identity shifts, right? That really required, one was quite traumatic, and the other, was a complete shift in identity. Yet I had been living this, hey, I can just put things on spreadsheets and, write my gratitude journal, and like everything's going to be okay. And so, I went down that path, kind of tried to just say, okay, I get this, but compartmentalize it and move on. And I was one of those folks that, was falling victim to what we now call toxic positivity, right? And so if there are any other geeks listening, I suggest looking at the work of Dr. Iris Mouse out of Cal Berkeley. And then there are a host of others, but if you seek her research, you'll see the other researchers in the area. She's now found that this concern that we have for happiness, for being happy all the time, is actually leading to clinical outcomes. So it's not just like, oh, poor mental hygiene, right? It's that when you get into that state of rumination, like, hey, all my friends, are out there and I'm here, it's insidious, right? Your subconscious starts to go, well, if happiness is out there, then that must mean I'm unhappy. And then that starts this downward spiral that can become pretty dark pretty quick. And then you add in the fact that we are comparing ourselves to the curated lives of others, not the real lives of others.
Yes.
And it gets even worse,
Oh my gosh. April, were you going to chime in?
No, I don't know. I mean, I feel like that is one of the biggest cruxes for me personally, is watching or comparing myself to anybody else, because I do things weird. I am a freak in my own like little space. And when I'm not comparing myself to other people, I'm having fun. I'm always having fun. But when I get into those comparison spaces, and especially in places like social media, it gives me so much anxiety, and it's not even worth it to, so sometimes I'm like, if I have to do something on social media, like I get in and I get out and try to not put myself in those places where I have anxiety. And so it's so important.
Yeah. And I think I figured this out. It's not in the book, but I got this wisdom from another academic. And where it becomes problematic is when the motivation creates dissonance, right? So if you're popping into social media because you want to get some vacation ideas, or if you have a hobby, like I love music, listening to bass guitar riffs, like that's a great use of social media. I know others in this space sometimes over villainize it. I think it's a useful tool, right? Or it wouldn't be so popular. But once that motivation starts to create dissonance, so like, oh my gosh, like to your point, why am I not like this? Like they look so happy, right? Just as an example, then all of a sudden, it it does become a problem, because now you're in this space of discomfort, right? And
Mhm.
there's this weird phenomena, especially because those algorithms are smart, that we want to displace that by more information gathering, and then that can, it turns into a dark hole really quick. And I know there's people now that are actualizing this, because it's kind of a phenomena that's, Facebook, admitted to last year. So people are trying to fix this, but I don't know. Again, we're going to get off the rails on the geek side, but I think it's something that the engineers didn't expect. But it's clear the phenomena is there, right? Like, it's really good if things are going great, because you'll get fed more stuff that you like, silly dance videos or things that are. But if it sees that you are, attracted to things that are kind of feeding your despair or your anxiety, it will load those up too. So it becomes, a quick downward spiral as fast as an upward spiral. And so being mindful of that, like, whoa, I'm in a downward spiral, let me get out of here. That's super smart on your part.
It's a lot of work,
man.
though, but yeah. Oh,
well, so to that part, we have this realization that, all right, things aren't what it's cracked up to be, and we want to take control and do things on our own, and we're listening, and we're like, wow, all right, I'm burnt out, maybe I'm feeling lonely, I'm in this pit of despair, whatever the case may be, but I'm so busy. How can I fit another thing in my already busy schedule? And you have some really great advice on where to start. So I would love to, Mike, have you, just school us.
Yeah, well, I think, I always admit, kind of lean on Laura Vanderkam's work here, and she's leaned on others. I think we all kind of know this intuitively, that fun shouldn't be another thing on your to-do list, or it definitely falls in the category of toxic positivity, right? So what you first want to do is create space. And I think the one thing that a lot of us do sort of lie to ourselves is that we don't have time, right? When you start to unpack the framework of 168 hours, even if you're working like 70 hours a week and you factor in good sleep hygiene at another 56, that still leaves a lot of time on the table, right? Even if you are a workaholic. So figuring out where those transition rituals are, so that you can really clear the space for fun to thrive, is an important first step. And so it could be as simple as, just looking at your phone and seeing how much time you're wasting on those apps. It could be, if you really are good at keeping a time journal already, doing kind of a retrospective. For a lot of people, unfortunately, your foray into fun, I try to make it fun by saying approach this intervention with some curiosity, but I meant time audit, inherently isn't fun, but just do it. It's not that hard to kind of pay attention to how you're spending your time, in that 168 hours. And when you go through that process of mindfulness, you can almost always find pockets of time to sort of exchange out activities. I have something called the play model, that allows you to kind of organize your time into 4 different quadrants, but you don't even need to use that, right? Just what are the things that aren't bringing you joy? And how can you potentially either augment them so they are fun, or just not do them altogether? And so the reason I don't go on and on about that particular thing is, generally, if I start giving examples, people are like, well, that doesn't fit for me, right? Well, the exercise fits for everyone. It's just going to be what's unique to you with regards to how you can extrapolate out what we call time affluence, right? Time where you have more agency and autonomy of using it than you give yourself credit.
Awesome. Oh, man. One of the things that you talked about that I want to dive a little bit deeper, you had talked about transition rituals. And I feel like as adults, we overlook those things, like we sort of take it for granted. But as a father to young kids, that is crucial to getting anything done with young kids. Like, if I don't give my son like a timer and saying, hey, you got 5 minutes before bedtime, and then, all right, it's bedtime, let's get into the flow of bedtime and what that entails. Like, if I had to like stop on a dime, hey, let's do this, it's not going to happen. So I would love for you to dive a little bit deeper into that. Like, for those people who may not even know what a transition ritual is, if you can just enlighten us what that is, and how can we use that as a space to potentially throw in some fun.
Yeah, I think it's really about mindset, right? So I love your frame, permission to play, for folks that know your work, like that's essentially a transition ritual, right? In that form. But it's really where you decide that your workday is over and you're transitioning to another facet of your life. And the problem is that we think that we do that, but most people don't, especially anyone that's tethered to their phone, right? And what happens is our subconscious actualizes that as work. As soon as we're answering emails, there's a couple of things that happen that are bad, right? One is we essentially, whether we want to admit it to ourselves or not, that becomes an extension of work. As soon as I'm with my kids. Are you? Because that's not where your attention is, right? This work comes from Matthew Killingsworth. So folks that are familiar with mind wandering, when we're in that space too, kind of 1 foot on the deck, 1 foot on the boat, we know we're not happy because we're not in the present moment, right? We're sort of just always kind of thinking about what's going to come next, looking for that variability. And so it can be whatever works for you. For some people that live by Outlook, or their calendar, like literally just say work is over. For some people, it can be putting their phone in the bread box, right? And like, okay, I get it. This is, or, for one dad, I heard it was literally, and then I started doing this and it works, just flipping your ball cap backwards. Like this, this is my fun time, right? And so whatever it means for you, it's just really that mindset shift that work is over. Because if you don't do it, right, then you allow it to creep in. And for those that are fearful that they're going to be less productive, I'm not going to throw, I feel like I've already thrown too much science at the wall.
Do it.
Keep doing it. Put on your hard hats, folks.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the important part about this is that this isn't just it is important to pay attention to the feeling, but like the fact that this is all backed with science it makes it that much more stronger. Like, I just feel like, we can say, hey, do this, but if there's actual data that's showing that this is helpful, we got to do it.
Yeah, there's a couple of things, right? So one is, if you look at productivity studies, the people that do these transition rituals are always more productive, right? And then also the folks that do it also have much better psychological well-being. So for the latter, go look at Dr. Cassie Holmes' work out of UCLA. She actually has a great book out as well called The Happiest Hour. The big aha for me, and this I was felt grateful to bring this research to the forefront, is this idea of the hedonic flexibility principle. And so this is some research out of Stanford, MIT, and Harvard, and it's a huge sample group, right? Like for academics, we tend to like that, right? Because a lot of times we'll prescribe things from science, and it's like, oh, but this was 18 people. Like, are you sure it applies to everyone? But this sample size was 28,000 people. And what they found, not surprisingly, is that folks that are burnt out look for poor ways to use their leisure time, right? What we call in the literature passive leisure. So that is things like just displacing discomfort on social media, or potentially drinking too much, or whatever it is, things that don't really fill your cup, don't lead to betterment. But the people that did find ways to create transitions in their life, and what I say, I use this term, taking time off the table for themselves. So they were doing fun things outside of work, showed up the next day as the best versions of themselves. So they really did have the, vigor and vitality to be more productive. So they're playing the long game, right? And so I already rattled off all the statistics at the beginning of this webinar. We know that people are burning out. They're not able to be productive at all. And where we see people being the most productive are the ones that are actually enjoying their life. And so that one was like, oh, okay, I'm on to something here. And I think more importantly, because I had some chance to interview the people behind the research just to make sure that I was getting the interpretation right. Not only are they more productive, but they also seek out hard challenges. So they're the ones that are leading to growth, because they're like, yeah, I'm enjoying things. Let's go seek out, what I call activities in the living quadrant, things that lead to transcendence that, potentially are a little bit more risky because I'm not so tired or depleted, right? And so that's why this stuff's important. And the reason that it's hard to get there is both the positive and negative effects are so slow that it's really hard to draw that line, right? Like after 6 months of really not enjoying your life, it's like, why do I feel like crap? Like, okay, well, really be mindful of how you were spending the last 6 months versus, if you have fun for 1 week, it's going to seem kind of novel and whimsical, but it's not going to lead to huge sort of, this huge boost in productivity. But what I found is 2 to 3 weeks of creating a fun habit, you'll know by week 4 if you really are, mindful of checking in. Gary, you can speak to this, right? That's essentially how you got out of the malaise of your marketing job, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's spot on. And I took an improv class and it was an accident, but the improv class was about 7 weeks. And yeah, it was something that I was looking forward to. At first, I did feel a little guilty, of like, oh, I have to leave work at a certain time. And then I got home a little late. But you're absolutely right in that it does like sort of come over a slow pace. And before you realize it, you blink, you're like, oh, wow. Yeah, things are going good. So this is really great. And it reminds me to that point of how it comes on slowly, both ways. How do you feel like the pandemic over the last 2 years has affected people's transition rituals and, maybe their outlook on life?
Yeah. So there's a blessing and a curse, right? So we'll start with the curse. The curse is obviously with hybrid work, you never really know when your day's over, right? And so that becomes quite problematic. And I've come to realize, especially because for whatever reason, a lot of working moms have been attracted to this because I think, to be fair, there is a gender bias. They, with regards to, you can look at the research here. Unfortunately, us men, Gary, we're making strides up until the pandemic, and a lot of that got slidden backwards, unfortunately, when so I'll leave that there, but I certainly have a lot of empathy for, female women in heterosexual relationships that also have a full-time job. It's just clear that, based on these time studies, they're some of the most time poor individuals. And so it's not just work that got blurred, right? It was also all of these new piled on domestic duties. And what does that mean? Like our kids now became our friends because we were their only connection, right? And so it's a very complex issue. Like I used to trivialize it just, sort of based on the lay data. And now that I've had this anecdotal data, it's like, it's still clear that some of these habitual routines haven't been undone yet because there were new norms, in the home that aren't just associated with work. It's also like, hey, you now need to be my 24/7 playmate, right? Like, so how do you kind of course correct that? And so that's become problematic. And also the fact that we let a lot of our friendships kind of go, right? Because we did have these play dates. We did have, weekly coffee, things of that. And those things went to the wayside. And so how do we reestablish those connections so that we're actually seeing friends again, feeling safe about that? I think we're coming out of it, but it's clear that, loneliness took a big hit, right? Like, that again, with the Good Life, making its rounds on the book tour, for folks that are familiar with that, it's clear that loneliness is a clear problem now too. And so those things were all hurt by the pandemic. The silver lining is that I think a lot of us got really intimate with time, right? I talk about in the book, if you have a near-death experience or, you're connected to death, like I was with my brother, it sort of opens up the importance of time being potentially more valuable than money in a way that is meaningful. But the pandemic really made us realize, that how important time is with regards to our rhythms and what is important. And is it work? Is it our family? Because we all felt that our physical safety was at risk. So it was fertile ground. You saw a lot of people come out of the pandemic with eyes wide open, like, I don't want to go back to this life that I have now had the opportunity, to see from a distance. Someone used the metaphor of, a fish doesn't understand they need water, to live until, they're forced out of the water, right? I think that's what happened to us in the pandemic. Like, so there's still, I think the door is closing, but there's still, this disruption that allows us to kind of piece back our life in a way that does work for us. Yeah. That was a long-winded answer. Sorry, but
no, I love that. Yes.
So important.
Yeah, especially the blessing and the curse is like yeah, it really shows 360. And I want to take a moment and you brought up a good point about how there is some form of gender bias. April, I would like to hear from you of like what's your thought on that? Have
Um,
you experienced that
oh,
as well?
yeah. I mean, I think, you know, I have so many things going on in my mind as you were talking, because you were talking about the fact that, like, you know, people who are burned out, like the things that they do show up as, you know, these like not quality, like off times, right? And I'm, you know, a victim of like massive burnout multiple times, both in the space of like doing something that I didn't love to do and doing something that I did love to do. And I have been for the last, you know, at least, you know, since the pandemic, really fighting this feeling of, you know, I can't take on all the things that I have taken on historically, where, you know, I've led myself to burnout, because I can literally slow down, which is not a good word or not a good term for people who are high achievers. They don't want to hear that. Like, but like being very, intentional about working more slowly in terms of the amount of things I'm committed to, um, so that when I show up and do the things that I want to do, like write another book or, you know, be there, be present with my family, that I'm actually there. And it's a really hard thing to unwire. But to speak to the whole gender bias thing, I mean, you know, I quit my full-time job so that I could be more present with my kids and manage the house. And the way that I have to manage the house is this crazy strict, like, to-do list every day. Like there's 150 things that need to be checked off in order for us to feel like we had a good productive day. And it doesn't overwhelm me, because I know that I'm not going to hit 100% every day, but just knowing what I could and need to do in order to make myself successful, because I've been working at that for so long, is important. But it's also, you know, then figuring out, because I am the primary house caretaker on top of being an entrepreneur and on top of all the other things, you know, trying to be social, trying to do all the things. It's really like breaking it down into the littlest things. And so when, you know, my husband came home, or, you know, is now working at home, you know, 1 to 2 days a week, and just introducing that different dynamic where I don't get the house to myself all day. You know, more stuff gets displaced the more that people are at home, and I can't do it all myself. And so, you know, working out of the pandemic, that initial like, oh my God, like everything is like out of order because everybody's here. It was really trying to figure out, like, how can I slowly start to delegate the littlest things to my family, so that I'm not like, you know, distracting them from school or distracting them from work and all this stuff, and that we don't like want to choke each other by the end of the day. But there is somebody that has to kind of manage the house in terms of making sure that things run smoothly. It's a job in itself, and that's not even including parenting, right? So it's like the parenting plus the work plus the house management, that all needs to happen in order to be able to create the space to have more fun. And so, you know, I have prioritized fun for the last 6 or 7 years, and it's been hard, but like more and more we're able to, you know, do things that that prioritize fun, that aren't just like, okay, well, we have to schedule this in because it's like, hey, there's a comedy show, like let's work towards that. And having to create that structure has been super key. Like I tell myself that in order for me to feel good and not overwhelmed, I'm not allowed to socialize, or I'm choosing not to socialize and
Okay.
do social events on school nights, because if I can't help get my kids ready for, you know, the next day, then I'm not ready for the next day, and then I wake up the next day and do nothing. So I know what it takes to be super productive for me, and not feel, you know, bad about it. But it takes some of that discipline. And, you know, people just know that in order to get on my calendar, it's got to be Friday night or Saturday night, and it works. So the people who can work with that are the people I get to see. So, but yeah, it's definitely not easy. And I didn't want to burden my family specifically with too much, but I it's like, at what point can I not handle it on my own and I need to ask for help? So yeah, I don't know if that's my long-winded answer.
No, I think that makes sense.
Yes.
I think the clear, like the discrete answer is it's clear that propensity of women had to take the responsibility of becoming teachers for whatever reason. I think men were indifferent, like not to throw rocks at my gender, but and then that like turned into this cascade, right? And we're still, which is unfortunate because it seemed like parity was we weren't there yet, but we're, before the pandemic, we were certainly moving in the right direction. So hopefully we'll get back on the rails there. Because you should go out on school nights and have to talk to your husband.
It's okay. No. I mean, but it's also just, that's a personal choice. I think I when I go out, I go out, right? And sometimes I will. Like I went out to dinner last night, but
you guys look great.
Some of that stuff. But in terms of like, hey, like there's a mom's event through the PTA where like we're gonna send you all to a comedy show, and I was like, oh, it's on a Thursday night. Yeah, I'm gonna stay home and I'll go to a comedy show on a Saturday night. It's fine. So it's really just knowing my priorities too. And fun is a priority, but it also like I know myself, and that overwhelm is not fun for me. And so I have to do everything that I need to do personally to stay away from that. And sometimes it says, it's saying no to certain things that I know that are fun, but I know that are going to, it's just like, don't go drinking before you do like a 7-mile run. Like you just don't, that's not fun. You can do it.
You hit on something that I think is important. And that is that if you're using your agency and autonomy, which it sounds like you are in this case, this isn't something that you feel is being dictated or mandated, but
I'm choosing for sure.
Yeah. One of the really interesting studies in the book I found was looking, again, kind of speaking to transition rituals, because those aren't meant just for work, right? I think one of the ways to find joy at work is to reclaim your lunch hour. And like, it's funny, when I first presented that, people are like, what are you talking about? And now there's been like amazing articles out, about like one of the best ways for partners to reconnect is at lunchtime, because domestic duties are so complicated after work, right? So I felt a little bit vindicated there, especially people that sort of said,
100%. That's like my husband, he texted me right before we went live and he was like, I'm going to go get poke bowls at 12:45. And I'm like, yes. And then we sit and we only eat for like 10 minutes together. But it's just being able to break away from the mundane of like being at the computer all day long, which he has been, on the computer all day long. So yeah, it's definitely interesting.
And in this study, what I found really interesting was people had more fun working through lunch if it was their choice versus having like a mandated fun lunch hour with their boss, because they just look at that as an extension of work because they know that's what's going to take place during the, and like things they don't want to talk about. But if, and probably if you're working through lunch, you're probably hopefully health, in a healthy manner, dipping into, some fun things on your, on your webpage or whatnot as well. But again, I meant, autonomy seems to be the key component there, right? It's certainly a key component to time affluence, this idea that we do have control over our domain, right? And so, certainly don't want to villainize the, if you're doing what you want to do and you're making choices that, are in agreement with how you want to see things run, then that is the right way,
Yeah, for sure.
As long as you're having fun on the weekends.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. I've got a book club meeting this weekend. I've got a comedy show. Like I'd have fun. And 7 miles. Maybe not so fun, but
yes. Well, to that point of creating more space, you talk a lot about activity bundling. Mike, do you mind diving into that a little bit and giving some pointers in that area?
Sure. I mean, it's a pretty simple concept, right? It's essentially trying to find ways in any activity that you're not really enjoying things and potentially bundling them with something that is fun. So in April's example of running, for me, that was adding music because, I felt kind of just, sometimes I like mindfulness, but, for me, 7 miles took a whole hour and I don't like to be alone with my brain for that long.
Oh yeah.
So drowning it out with Rage Against the Machine is super fun for me. So that So I think, figuring out whatever that is, like, if you really want to engage with an activity with a friend, like, preempting that with, potentially going to a comedy show or a concert or doing something fun, like figuring out ways to use your time in a way that kind of increases the pleasure that you're going to experience becomes a great way to find fun in maybe a busy schedule, right? I mean, look at the things that you're already doing. One of the ways that I love activity bundling as a parent is if you already have like this domestic duty that you're essentially just having to watch your child because, to have your partner's back or whatever it is, like, how can you look at that hour, not from a sense of I have to do it or this sense of duty, but like, what can the 2 or 3 of you do that is fun for all of you? And so, attaching an activity to things that you're already doing is a great way. And then for those that are familiar with James Clear's work, or BJ Fogg for that matter, you can also use fun as a way to get hard things done. So this is a technique called habit bundling, which I kind of feel falls within activity bundling. And that is that we know that with the allure of some sort of reward, we generally will do harder stuff more often. And so if there's something you really need to get done, tie it in with something really fun afterwards, and you'll find that generally you'll do the harder thing. So those are 2 examples of activity bundling, or a few examples of activity bundling.
Yeah, and we try to do this as much as possible in the ASC. So, even like virtual co-working, trying to do things together. I do challenges with people all the time in our community where, we're like, okay, we got to get this thing done, and it's not fun, but let's sit here and we come up with a reward at the end. So I'm in one that is working until the end of March, and I'm like, I can't, I'm going to treat myself to a facial, which I normally will get, but now I'm like almost preventing myself from getting one because I really want this thing that I'm working on, this project that I'm working on, to be done. But it's finding those motivation factors too, I think, which makes it kind of fun, because then there's like a little bit of healthy competition. And
and you bring up a good example of it kind of falls in that realm, kind of falls into reframe story editing, but especially those with kids, or even if you sort of want to play with this yourself. In science, we call it hedonic tone, and it's not meant to, it has no bearing on hedonism or the ethics of that. Hedonic tone just essentially means, are you enjoying the thing, right? Yeah. And so like, if you look at this construct of hedonic tone being having fun, like, can you use it as a tool to get either others or yourself to do the thing? So there's like been a lot of research with regards to healthy eating, of just like whimsically naming food for your kids, or like cutting vegetables into Star Wars shapes or whatever it is. Like, you will see an increase in that behavior simply by just making it more fun. So that's another like really useful way, especially for folks that like to geek out on behavioral science, to use fun in a way that, like, actually is for good, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Love that.
Wow. Just thought about that. Just threw me off from my other question. But I'm gonna get back to it. Rewind.
Star Wars. I know that's probably what
I know, right? That's what I was like. I know, right? Yeah. I'm like taking notes for myself. I'm like, yeah.
Little cucumber Death Stars.
Right? Yeah. Just talking about like getting down to brass tacks and whatnot. You were talking about just like, we have the ability to create choices, and not really taking that for granted. Can you just sort of walk us through that?
Yeah, I think what you're getting at is, whenever we have better options, we make better choices. And so one of the things that I advocate is, and this is based on seeing folks, especially productive folks, that are having the most fun. They're the ones that are, again, this is like one of those things where there's this little bit of headwind, because being premeditated by fun, paradoxically doesn't sound fun, but creating a little bit of choice so that you don't have that cognitive load about what you're going to do when you do have that time seems to really allow fun to thrive. So there's 2 steps, right? There's one, what I call creating a fun file. And so like, brainstorm a bunch of things that you think would be fun, And then whittle down that list to 8 to 15 choices. And there's reasons for that. If it gets over 15, I'm sure anyone that has been in a partnership has sat and like thought for an hour what they're going to have for dinner because they haven't been premeditated about what it is. Like, there's some funny SNL skits about that. We don't have to get into it, but I think most people can relate. And so being a little bit premeditated about what you want to do, as lame as that sounds, becomes really helpful for actually integrating those things in. Some people will do that naturally. Some people really do enjoy hearing that nudge, because then they do it and they're like, oh my gosh, I forgot that I like this thing, or I forgot that I really enjoyed time with Sally, or whatever it is. And, that gives them that nudge to reintegrate it. The other is putting it on your schedule. So, actually being the one, even if you're an introvert, to, say, hey, I really miss you, even if that you isn't a thing, if that you is a hobby, and putting it on your schedule so it actually gets done. And if you do those two things, you'll naturally see, these opportunities kind of manifest.
Great point about that. And one anecdote, and then brings me to the other point I was going to bring up. That really helped my partner and I, like when it came down to dinner, especially on the weekends, where we were like, oh yeah, we wanted to do something more fun than cooking. But when you're sort of put on the spot, like, what's it going to be? But when you're in a better frame, to have that list handy, and have a habit of like, oh yeah, you think of that, add it to the list. And then when it comes down to it, it's like, oh, yeah, we have like a nice little list of things to choose from, and it does make it more interesting. But
multiple people have brought up, because I know this is an adult audience, that I think the wisdom of sexual therapists for the last year is talking about how, as lame as it sounds, if you put that on the calendar, it magically starts to increase for folks that are, so I think, we could talk about, as something as provocative as that, and so, not to get us off the rails, but it's funny when I bring it up and they're like, it works for pretty much everything. And I'm like, okay, good to know,
Well, so to that point, the next point is, different way of looking at happiness, of, not just about the experiences, but you talk about like how we're good at anticipating things. So yes, if it's in your calendar, I feel like your imagination, and this is just for everything, not just sexual pursuits and whatnot, but just things that are fun that you have on your calendar, and the fact that you can see it coming up. I feel like you have that sort of before effect of just thinking about it, and then it makes everything that much more sweeter. What are some other reasons why, again, putting things on our calendar and things like that ultimately will help us be happier in the long run?
Well, you brought one up, which I think is interesting, that, and I think I got this from Catherine Price, but then I also saw it in some research that I saw, this idea that if you're not doing that, then you really do waste a lot of what Colin West calls admin time, right? Once you decide that you're going to do something, then you don't have to do as much deliberation about what that thing is, right? Oh, okay, we're going to have spaghetti, so I just need to go to the store and get noodles and meat, right? Where those things can really stretch out. They, what I call an agonizing activity, is now, dinner is now kind of taken 3 hours of time, and 2 that are really uncomfortable because you're kind of just meandering about again, choice, and then what do I get? So there's that, right? It sort of shortens the amount of time that's just not really great. And then the other is that you actually get it done. So anything that goes on our calendar is somehow magically immutable. I don't, that's not a science-based claim. That just seems to be, for even things I hate, if they're on my calendar, unfortunately they get done. And so having this mandate on your calendar to actually do the thing, there's a good chance it will, where you sort of make casual plans. And, I bring up a John Mulaney joke in the book to kind of, it just doesn't happen, right? If you kind of say, yeah, we should get lunch sometime, how many times does that actually, but if you're intentional about it, hey, I really want to have lunch with you, let's get it on the calendar now, you guys are going to have lunch, right? Or whatever the fun thing is. And so there's that two thing. One, it shortens sort of the admin time needed to do the thing. And most of us don't like admin time. The other is it's actually going to happen instead of it being conjecture, or you're just kind of talking about it. And over time, when you keep making those false promises, that can, that's another one of those things that's slowly insidious, right? You're just like, wow, I sure talk about this a lot, but I'm not doing it,
Yeah, you're making this is making me laugh because I just feel like all of my life is and satisfaction is all around like not necessarily even just putting things on the calendar, but creating a process for how things are done. Like I had a conversation with somebody about like how laundry can be such a pain in the butt, and like where clothes are everywhere, and there's piles and piles of laundry that gets stuck, and it's something that has to keep on going, but you have to create a process. But if it's something you can't put on your calendar, at least have a process for it. Like I have a monthly process for like what I need to do in a step-by-step to like run through my business expenses every month, or to reconcile my business expenses, which is not fun, but I'm like, okay, then I can just check these things off. But there was something else that you were saying that I just now lost train of thought because I had so many like.
I think about actually getting it on the schedule so that it becomes immutable instead of just
for sure. And I think that just if we create those processes, then again, it's less admin time, and I just I like live for this. So I'm just like, I'm geeking out on this because it's like, this is what I do so that I don't have to think about it. And, like Wednesdays today is grocery shopping day. And I have this like list of things that I've bought in the past. And I just go through like, has that run out? No. Or is this a new thing that I want to add? And then I can just keep on building off that list like week to week. And I set a very like small window for when I can go grocery shopping. So I don't sit there and like be hungry and say like, oh, I want to buy like that candy because I'm hungry right now. And it just, it really like helps you hone in on, getting in and getting out and just, and being done, and then focusing and creating more space for more fun. So
yeah, I think, I know we're running up against the hour, but if folks are wanting to play with the constructs of like how to make any of those activities fun, it's, how are you going about the activity? So, a lot of folks talk about, taking the view of an anthropologist, right? Like kind of step away from it and say, how am I doing, how is this person doing it in a way that I don't like? And how could we redo this in a way that might be more enjoyable? So actually playing with the activity. And if you hate the activity, how can you just get rid of it? Potentially like with laundry, for a while we were outsourcing it because, we tightened our budget and that was something we didn't want to do. The people you're doing it with, right? So like one of the amazing things about ASC is all the fun people that are part of it. So you're kind of attracted to that thing, but there might be, things that you really want to do, but you just don't like the people that you're doing with them because they're not fun and they're not enjoyable to be with. So can you play with that dynamic? And then some could be the environment, right? Like, again, the pandemic thing, I love working in coffee shops. So I couldn't wait to get out of my home office. For whatever reason, I just find that really enjoyable. And it's more fun for me to do my work, where I can also kind of people watch. And so that's just one example. For some people, it's taking their meetings. I'm going to go do this with a buddy where we're going to get on our phones, but we're both going to be in nature because it's a lot more pleasant than sitting in front of our desks on Zoom. So like, how could you play with those three variables? The people you're doing it with, the environment you're doing it in, and then the way you're actually doing the activity.
Yeah. So in the chat, Carissa is saying, I got to the point where I resent my calendar, but then without it, I don't get much done. I think I need to repair that relationship with my calendar. And she like put things on the calendar. And then when the time comes, she's like, you're not the boss of me, which I love. And I think that's like a hard, when the things that are supposed to help you are triggering you, you have to really look at those things and say like, what is it about it that's triggering me? I had a to-do list app that I was using. And every time something was overdue, because I just kept on pushing it to the next day, it would like blare in like red that like it's overdue, and like that would like give me anxiety to the point where I just like started a whole brand new, like switched to a completely brand new app that like gives me like a little bit more healthy. It's like that red was triggering me, so I was like, I need an app that doesn't have red because it like I get scared. So it's like really thinking about and diagnosing like, okay, this thing that I need to, that is supposed to help me, it's triggering me, like what is the trigger, and trying to figure out how to switch that up, because there's so many different tools out there, but sometimes like they work for whoever created them, but then
Right.
they don't realize that like there's that one design flaw that is just like triggering, you or whoever else, and really thinking about that. And then Terry said he needs to schedule fun more, he puts it in his journal, but doesn't set aside actual time to do things, which is interesting because I think you also need to figure out like, well, what is the fun thing that you can do? And
An
how can you
experiment, right? I would suggest to Terry, like, schedule it and see how that works for you for, a couple weeks at least. Because then it will get out of your journal and actually, you'll be doing the thing, as it were.
Yeah.
Right?
Or maybe even like taking, because like the concept of fun is one thing, but like how do you turn that into action, right? Because fun is different for everybody, right? Like cooking and gardening could be fun for somebody else, where like playing the ukulele is, something that's fun for me. So it's really identifying what the fun is and then scheduling that, and not just I need to have fun, because then it's like, well, then you have to think about what the fun is before you can actually have it, right?
Yeah. In science, we call that valence. And I think like the good sort of measuring stick is, are you attracted to it? Like when you leave it, do you feel good about how you spent your time? Are you invigorated rather than depleted? And would, in retrospect, would you say, yeah, I enjoyed that, and then obviously there'll be levels to it, but you're spot on. And like, to the extent you can do that with things that you're already doing, even better, right? Because then, you're just sort of enjoying your time, as long as it's your choice again. So.
Yeah.
Choice is the key.
One thing on sort of calendars and whatnot, and then we're going to bring this plane to a happy landing, just because we're almost at time. One of the benefits of having things in your calendar and having that space sort of protected for you is that if you're, especially in the situation, say you work a normal job and you, have other people that rely on you, a lot of times we feel guilty, and we feel like we need to be tethered to our devices and answer. And, as Mike eloquently put it, that is like the 1 foot on the dock and 1 foot in the boat. And we're not really enjoying it. But I have yet to be in a situation when someone says, "Oh, I've been trying to get a hold of you," and you said, "Oh, I had a meeting," and they're like, "Oh, my bad. All right, cool. Totally get it." People respect that something is in your calendar, and the reason why you didn't get back to them is because you were, in a meeting. So what another benefit of putting it in your calendar, so that if there are people that are looking for you and you don't respond to them right away, you have an immediate excuse.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, Mike, you said a lot, so much stuff. I'm going to have to go back and rewatch. What is
read the book,
right? What two things for you. One, what is the most urgent thing that people should play with or do? And then after you say that, then the floor is yours to just let people know how they can stay in touch with you. And then I'm going to turn it over to April to close it out.
Yeah, I think it's really finding that space in your schedule, right? I mean, for most of us, we're what we say time poor, right? And so how do you create some time affluence in your schedule? I think most of us will require this intervention that takes like 2 to 3 weeks. So to your point, that first week of improv class, it's new. You're on a path to mastery. There's, even if you're not like picking up a new hobby, the change tends to be a little bit uncomfortable. So figure out some things that you can, remove from your day-to-day, so you can start to add some variability and some fun in there, and then check back in with yourself, to see if it was invigorating or not. And I'm quite confident that it will be. And then what's so great about this work is that then it's an easy sell. Like all of a sudden you see that false social norm for what it is. And it doesn't erode your self-worth being tied to productivity. On the contrary, most people will become more productive. And if you don't believe me, again, Google the hedonic flexibility principle. So that's the science and the to-do. If you're interested in my work, again, my book did launch, and so The Fun Habit is available wherever you enjoy buying your books. Thanks. And
on Audible too. You can have Mike read in your ear.
It's very satisfying.
And my website's michaelrucker.com. I blog a lot there too, as well, about the science of fun.
Awesome. Bring it home.
Yay.
You ready?
Yes, bring it home.
Thank you so much, Mike. What?
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
I knew it was
Like,
going to be fun. So
I know. I want to keep talking, but I know that you are a busy man. So
I'm a little
thank
bit
you guys.
bummed that, yeah,
Thank you guys for
I wanted
watching.
more cowbell and more siren, but yeah, I
Yeah,
talked too
but
much. So.
yeah, no, it's awesome. And thank you so much. And, you know, Mike is a part of the Accountability Success Circle, our community, which is awesome. So you can always reach out to him there or by his other socials. This is such a great conversation. Let us know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you next month for the next webinar. Check us out at accountabilitysuccesscircle.com if you want more information.